There are fewer than 30 men in the world qualified to drive Formula One. A mere half dozen, perhaps, to win. At this moment, I'm inclined to think you're not one of them.
No, you want to.
Keep up the good work, Stephen, and there you have it. There you go.
Hello, this is Desiree for F1weekly.com. I'm your in-depth correspondent.
Let's go with the qualifying, Steve.
Welcome to F1weekly.com. My name is Clark Rogers. I'm the host of the program. I'll be joined by Nasser Hamid, my co-host. This is podcast number 791, June 3rd, 2019. Nasser?
Thank you, sir. I say greetings and racing regards. This Memorial Day weekend podcast is dedicated to the one and only, the great Niki Lauda. Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Nasser. On today's program, great Indy 500, but no Fernando. Ferrari continue to fumble. Renault screw up even more. And the inaugural Sonoma Speed Festival was extremely impressive to the host. And this week, we have a new episode of Pegler's Perspective. And I want to remind everybody, we need your contributions to keep this program on the air. Just click on the Support F1 Weekly tab. You know, you want to. Anybody who sends $100 or more gets the coffee cup of the week. Nas, welcome to the studio. How are you?
I am doing very good, sir. Thank you. But first, a shout out to members of F1 Weekly Familia, Mr. Louis Jensen and Mrs. Didi Jensen, who were visiting the United States on their honeymoon. We met last year in Den Haag and went to the Zandvoort F3 and DTM races, and it was great to see them again at the Indy 500. And he sent me a photo of what happened on Monday morning after the race. They were having breakfast in America when a very familiar face rode into town on his Harley Davidson, the 1996 Formula One world champion, Mr. Damon Hill. So that was very exciting. And how is Mr. Rogers holding up after watching the Indy 500 sans machismo?
No, it was exciting. I mean, the Indy 500 was fun. Alexander Rossi, the fight between him and Pagenaud, I guess on the last 20 laps was very, very exciting. But in the end, that was a great 500, but we did not have a Fernando and Más Macho del Mundo.
Yes, and I take you have never been to the Indy 500. I would highly recommend. Man, I was sitting in between the turn 4 and the pit entrance, and to see these cars coming into the turn 4 full blast and going straight full blast, very, very impressive.
I'm glad you're happy, Nasser.
Man, every motor race I watch, I get happier and happier. So let there be more motor racing. That's what I say. Shall we move from back home again, Indiana, to faraway land called Monaco?
See.
Well, this was interesting. Just a little info on this race. First Grand Prix here took place in 1919. And was won by an English Bugatti driver, William Grover William. But obviously that name does not win anymore in Formula One racing. But that's another story. But I do enjoy, on the racing weekends, they do the pre-race press conferences with team principals and then with the drivers. And it's amazing. I was watching for the Monaco Grand Prix conferences. Christian Horner, man, he never fails to find a way to send sling and arrows towards Viry-Châtillon, and the tradition continued in Monte Carlo. He and Cyril Abiteboul were seated next to each other, and at one point Cyril said to Christian, "You cannot make fun of me now, we are no longer partners." And I don't know when this slugfest from Red Bull towards Renault will stop. Have you ever seen any of this Christian Horner slings and arrows towards Renault?
It's fun. I like it now. It's great.
Now, the only thing I can say about Collie is this. I don't know what you think about this, but I have a feeling that Lewis Carl Hamilton has the support, all the support of Mercedes and Scuderia Ferrari to get his sixth championship this year. Keeping Leclerc in the pits during closing minutes of Q1 was as impressive as bringing Alonso in the pits behind Webber in Abu Dhabi 2010, which beckons the question, when will they learn? What say you on this situation?
It just gets worse and worse and worse. I have no idea, but you're absolutely correct. I believe that Ferrari are secretly in love with Toto Wolff.
And Lewis Hamilton.
Indeed, everybody loves Hamilton except for me.
Yeah, and Charles Leclerc said of the team's decision, he looked so very upset, and who can blame him? He said this was very difficult one to take, and this was his home Grand Prix, you know. But I mean, that thing they did in Abu Dhabi with Nando cost Chris Dyer his job, and it's just, it seems like from Prancing Horse to Red Bull to Mercedes, they all want to help Lewis get his first championship after winning his first 5. And I think, Clark, it's about time you also jump on the LCH bandwagon, which, will be passing through Compton very soon. And then they will take you on a tour of El Segundo also.
Yeah, I'll have my essay. Check it out.
And when the Monaco weekend was over, this was pretty impressive. LCH was sitting on 85 pole positions and 77 Grand Prix wins, plus a healthy 17 points lead ahead of re-energized Valtteri Bottas, who is looking more and more like a soft bunny. And I heard a rumor, I'm not sure if this is true, I heard a rumor that one of Lewis's ex-teammates, a certain double world champion, whose name I just can't seem to find in my mind, has been listening to Some Guys Have All the Luck. And that was an EMI zinger of the day. What will you do, Mr. Rogers?
Some guys do have all the luck.
And they get all the breaks, right? When Bottas has a flat tire in Azerbaijan, when Charles Leclerc has a problem in Bahrain.
Yep.
Oh man, so lucky to be so lucky, I must say. But I have to say the only thing that will slow down Lewis's silver streak is Max as his teammate in 2020. Now that may be perfect F1 vision, but I just don't see that happening. But I do have a feeling if Esteban Ocon replaces Bottas after the season, he will soon find out LCH is no lounge lizard compared to Sergio Perez. So your thoughts on the race, and what say you on Lewis marching to his 6th? Still a long way to go, but that's what it looks like.
Monaco, extremely boring. I tried to watch it again, and I just decided that another episode of Gilligan's Island was just more fun.
Well, did you see how the tires were in the closing stages on Lewis's car?
They were wonderful.
You think so?
Yes.
Man, if Nando was driving this car, I think you would have recorded this podcast before the race was over.
It's very possible, but for me, I did not see anything very exciting until maybe when Max made an attempt at a pass. And he should have stuck it in there, but he got scared.
Well, he is a matured race car driver now. But this race will long be remembered for Lewis going more than 65 laps on medium tires when they were expected to be good for 50 laps. Sure, the tight nature of the track helped him, as it did for Danny Rick last year when he was down on power, but it still takes a special talent to provide such everlasting memories as we witnessed in Monte Carlo. Now, many in the racing media are comparing closing laps of this race to the great battle between Senna and Mansell in 1992. I think that was at a different level of intensity, especially taking into account the personality and rivalry between Senna and Mansell back in the day. And this love tap you are referring to on Lewis, which he got from Max, was expected all race long. No harm, no foul, I guess. Max is definitely a much more mature driver and was also careful with Bottas at the first corner of the opening lap. And I have to say that what happened between Max and Lewis, I was expecting it many, many laps earlier. And when this was happening, when they were very close to each other, because Max was within the second of Lewis for a long time, lap after lap. And I was thinking that big beneficiary here could be Sebastian Vettel, and thanks to Max's 5-second penalty for his clash with Bottas in the pit lane, Seb was promoted to second. And now listen to this, Clark. He has not won a race, he being Seb, since last year's Belgian Grand Prix, and is now 50 points behind LCH, which means auf Wiedersehen to the 2019 championship for the 4-time world champion. And here I must add, Joe Sabert has stated that he heard a rumor in Monaco that Sebastian Vettel is considering retiring at the end of the season because he does not have the package, and he has a cage rattler also. So do you think that Sebastian Vettel will retire at the end of the season?
I can see that. He's got a family. You know, he takes his children to school in the morning. He saw Rosberg quit. There are no other teams to go to. He's in his early 30s, and he knows Ferrari is incapable of providing him with a package.
Yeah, and with the rules being pretty much the same next year, I think his championship with Ferrari is toast this year and next year. And who knows how the 2021 package will look like. But, the Dieter Zetsche has retired and a new guy has come in. He's saying Mercedes will remain in Formula One beyond the, current, whatever the agreement is called, Concorde or Jumbo Jet agreement they have. So I see Mercedes keep on rolling, The Stuttgart steamroller will keep on chucking win after win. Not good for the sport, but hey, that's the way these things go sometimes.
Yeah, it's terrible for the sport. It's terrible for me. It's terrible for this podcast. But what can you do? Nobody is stepping up to the plate. And I predict if Renault doesn't come together soon, that they're going to pull out. And I'm afraid Formula One could be in sort of a big mess very soon.
No, I think Formula One will survive, at least for a lifetime.
I mean, I agree. I think they'll survive. But we're never going to have what we used to have.
Well, things do change, and we'll see how it works out. I think with Ross Brown and these people they have, I think some sanity will prevail when it comes to the new rules. But you have big vested interests in big manufacturers. They will get what they want, for the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah. Okay, heads are rolling in Maranello. With turmoil on track, it appears upheavals are also taking place behind the scenes as performance engineers Alessandro Cinelli, he was in the aerodynamics area, and Giacomo Tortora in the chassis and tire department area. They are apparently no longer in the post they once held, and there are reports that designer Simone De Resta may return to Ferrari. He was earlier farmed out to Alfa Romeo. So it remains to be seen how these things will work out. Now we come to Valtteri Bottas, looking beautiful after taking pole and victory in season opener. Now reality is settling in. He was very close to Lewis in quali, and I'm sure he will win more races this season. He cannot afford to have a score like 10-4 wins in Lewis's favor, or Ocon may be driving his car next season. I have a feeling, and you tell me what you think, Lewis will have more than 10 wins this year. He is already sitting on 4 wins after 6 races in 2019. And according to him after Monaco, that his performance and driving has been average this year. And I think he really comes alive in the second half of the season. So do you expect him to get a dozen wins this year?
Yes, I do actually, because all the wins this year have been by Mercedes. There are no other winners. So he only has to out-qualify Bottas because apparently Bottas is not that good with the clutch.
Yes. So we'll see how it works out. But Canada is coming up, a race on the same time zone as East Coast of US of A. So I'm looking forward to it.
Right.
Okay, now this was very interesting. 4 Honda-powered cars in the top 8 calls for a special shout-out, and this one goes out to the one you love. Good evening, Mr. Alonso. Konnichiwa. Max, Gasly, Kvyat, and Albon, all in the top 8. And I have to say, among the rookies, Albon has been the most impressive. And we know this track is not as fast as Canada or Monza, but do you think Honda has come back to where they should have been 4 years ago?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen this Honda, I don't think Honda is going to beat the hell out of Mercedes this year. but I can see them winning races and, sticking it to Lewis, especially through, who, Max Verstappen, next season.
We'll see what happens. I mean, don't forget, Mercedes is getting better and better as well. So that's where the problem is. When you think you're catching up, they're moving up. Moving on up to the east side.
Now, talking of your favorite team, Renault, there are reports now that Nico Hülkenberg may be going to Red Bull, which is kind of interesting. They normally take their own people they have hired and fired and rehired and refired. But his contract is up at the end of the season, and I don't think this package is going anywhere anytime soon, just like the McLaren, and I don't even want to talk about Williams' reference to these two teams. Do you think Nico Hülkenberg will move away from Renault?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think Ricciardo wants to move away from Renault.
He must be regretting the move, I have to say.
Of course he is.
And I can see Nico Hülkenberg going to Red Bull. He's a German-speaking guy, and so is Helmut Marko, so they can do a little bit of Jawohl. And he's a very good driver, I followed his career from his junior days, and it's a shame that he never got into a competitive machinery. Apparently, at one time, he came very close to joining Ferrari, but so did Riccardo Patrese and many others. But I would like to see this kid but it's one of those things, it may be one of those situations like Michael Andretti and Rubens Barrichello and a few others. You go to a team, and then you walk into the garage, and they show your teammate's car, and it says Max on the side. And that's when your dreams become Mini in an instant. And I'm not talking Mini Cooper here.
Me comprendes.
Any thoughts on the Lance Stroll situation?
No, I mean, I don't think about people like this.
Well, at least he has job security.
He does have job security and job billion.
Yes. And Williams, man, wow. For one race, they did not finish dead last.
I suppose that's true, but what a mess.
I was expecting some action from Kimi Raikkonen, but did not work out the way I was hoping and thinking.
No, he had a sloppy day, didn't he?
Yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes. But I have to say, this race, compared to most Monaco Grand Prix, was very exciting, at least in the closing stages. And what is interesting, 90% of rain was expected here and also at the Brickyard. But, I don't know who they are hiring for Weather Channel, for weather reports, but both Indy people and FOM, they need to hire professionals for rain prediction.
They could call me.
And what will you say? Nando?
Si, bravo.
The forecast calls for Nando. What is the update on him? Oh, talking of Alonso, man, he is everywhere. And I'm not making this up. The doctor I see here in Tampa, his last name is Alonso. And I was watching a documentary just a couple of days ago. The head of Airbus flight operation is a gentleman by the name of Fernando Alonso, and he is not an ex-F1 world champion. So no matter where I look, or anytime I listen to the F1 podcast, the name I hear most is Fernando Alonso. What's going on here, Mr. Rogers?
Well, not only that, but we do have 24 Heures du Mans coming up.
Yes, and who's going to win that?
Fernando El Mas Macho.
With zero competition?
That's all we need. Ask Lewis about zero competition.
Well, he thinks Bottas is a real feisty fighter.
Right.
But, whether it's Bottas or Schumacher in the Ferrari or Senna in the 88 McLaren, you got to make hay when the sun is shining bright, as in Arizona desert.
Indeed.
You have to put the serious dry heat on your teammate, and that's when dry heat on a teammate creates cage rattling, and we all know how much we love that.
We do love that, but we don't see very much of it.
Yeah, lately it's missing, but I think we're seeing a little bit of that at Scuderia Ferrari.
Very little. It reared its head and it stopped.
What I was also expecting is cage rattling at McLaren between newcomer Lando Norris and Carlos Sainz Jr., but it hasn't panned out that way, at least as yet.
You're absolutely correct.
Now, seriously, taking into account what they have at disposal, between George Russell, the rookie, Lando Norris, and Alexander Albon, who has impressed you the most?
It would have to be Albon.
Yeah, and the least was expected from him, but man, he is doing a very, very good job. I'm impressed. And it really goes to show, Clark, when you have good drivers who are unable to, the window of opportunity in Formula One is very small. If they cannot make it happen in that time, how many of them are discarded? Like this English kid, Oliver Rowland, I think he's a very good driver. If somebody gives him a decent opportunity, he can do well. And there was Robert Wickens, who raced in Europe, won races in GP3 Formula 2, and then also Robin Freins. And these kids, if they had been given a proper opportunity, I think they could have become very good too.
I agree.
Any other thoughts on Monte Carlo Grand Prix before we move to our break and Motorsports Mondial?
Well, my thought is, why don't we take a quick break? We'll come back with Pegler's perspective, and then we'll throw it back at you with Motorsports Mondial. We'll be back after these brief messages.
Honesty is something we all look for, especially when it comes to auto service. Honest Engines Auto Service Tallahassee is where you'll find it. Since 2005, they've been delivering trusted, dependable service to Florida's capital. Honest Engines is your full-service auto repair center. Bumper to bumper, they have you covered. Honest Engines Auto Repair offers a variety of services: transmission repair, oil change service, and much, much more. Don't let just anyone work on your car. Bring it to Honest Engines. They'll give your baby the care it deserves. They work closely with you to make sure you know what's being done. With Honest Engines, you don't have to guess what their team is doing. Their highly experienced and certified technicians know just what your car needs, and they'll make sure you do too. So if you're in the Tallahassee area and you need auto repairs, give Honest Engines a call, 850-421-8461, and tell them F1weekly.com sent you. Honest Engines Auto Repair, right on the corner, right on the price, 718 Gay Street, Tallahassee.
And now, here's Philip Pegler's perspective.
Brick wall at the Brickyard. In 1909, across the Atlantic, amidst a week of bloody confrontations between the army and the citizens of Catalonia, the young King Alfonso XIII ruled Spain. Meanwhile, closer to home in the city of Indianapolis, Graham Carl Fisher envisioned the world's second purpose-built raceway when he created the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Originally, Fisher proposed a 3-mile circuit aimed at providing the world's manufacturers with a facility on which to test their vehicles at high speed. However, when he began looking for property for his track, he soon realized that he would have to scale down his vision, and ultimately this became the 2.5-mile track that we know today. With a degrading dirt and rock surface which unquestionably contributed to the accidents and 5 fatalities in the inaugural 3 days, the decision was made to resurface the entire track with a single layer of bricks. Prior to its completion, locals were already calling the track the Brickyard, and today, as homage to that moniker and the track's storied history, the Speedway proudly displays a yard of bricks at its start-finish line. In 1937, shortly after the 25th Indianapolis 500 in far-off New Zealand, the world welcomed a man whose name would become synonymous with the excellence in the world of motorsport. The great Bruce McLaren, driver, engineer, and inspirational genius who founded McLaren Automotive in 1963, went on to set the benchmark as an owner and driver. The team which bears his name had gone on to win the Formula One World Championship 8 times as a constructor, together with 12 World Drivers titles and 2 Indianapolis 500. Now, with American businessman and entrepreneur Zach Brown at the helm, McLaren seeks to return to the Brickyard and claim a 3rd Indianapolis 500. In 2017, in partnership with Andretti Autosport, engine supplier Honda, and the incredible talents of IndyCar rookie Fernando Alonso, the team was a genuine contender for the victory. However, its return for this year's race has told an altogether different story, and with a very different outcome. And arguably one of the most successful racing enterprises in the world, McLaren has recently seen a raft of changes in the boardroom which have adversely affected its results on the track. In this post-Ron Dennis era, Martin Wishmarsh appeared to continue to keep the McLaren team at the sharp end of the F1 grid, but in truth the chain of events that began the team's slow yet rather graceless fall from dominance had already been set in motion in the early 2000s, with the fractured relationship between chief designer Adrian Newey and Dennis himself. Following the 2007 Spygate scandal and the ensuing dirty politics war between Dennis and Max Mosley, the team began its seemingly irreversible nosedive. Even the talents of Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, and 2009 F1 champion Jenson Button were not enough to keep the team flying straight and level, and by the end of 2013, the outfit had bid farewell to its Mercedes alliance and tried to turn back the clock by aligning itself with Honda. We all know the story, but therein lies one of the many broken links in McLaren's chain of operation. Last year, Zak Brown boldly announced that McLaren would return to the Brickyard with Fernando Alonso in a quest to win the Borg-Warner Trophy for the third time. Alonso, who himself is seeking the international motorsports trifecta of the Le Mans 24 Hours, the Monaco Grand Prix and the Indianapolis 500, united with McLaren once again in partnership with Carlin Motorsports, who are actually a relatively new but established IndyCar team. Carlin are based in Farnham in the UK, not far from Woking, and Trevor Carlin, a man who has devoted his life to motorsport and is responsible for the nurturing and development of countless racing drivers around the world, is yet to see his team win an IndyCar race. But one only has to look at the history of Carlin in every other discipline and genre of racing to see that it will be only a matter of time before they conquer IndyCar and win. The greater question is how and why a team like McLaren, with their history and heritage, could fail so spectacularly to be on the competitive radar of the most famous race in the world. There seem to be so many issues, each inextricably linked to one another, that it's really difficult to say. But the fact remains that for all intents and purposes, the IndyCar is a one-make formula, with each team having an identical Dallara chassis. The variable comes with the choice of Honda or Chevrolet engine. Both are equally competitive, as demonstrated in the closing laps of the race, and so the remaining variables are in the individual team's preparations and in ancillary items. On a fundamental level, McLaren, a team with every possible tool and means at its disposal, failed to assemble a kit car that would drive in a rectangle at a competitive speed for 500 miles. In layman's terms, this is like Joseph of Nazareth, a renowned carpenter, being unable to assemble a wooden bed from IKEA. Essentially, it's a disgrace. Not only were the team unable to get the car up to speed, they failed to have a spare car at the ready. Their own car had been accidentally painted in the wrong shade of orange and was not worthy for human eyesight, and their test car, provided by Carlin, was not set up correctly for Indianapolis. Alonso's patience was mind-blowingly endless, and he appeared to accept this cataclysmic failure all in his stride and walked away with dignity. As one looks ahead, one might wonder what it would take to bring Ron Dennis back for a second time. On the surface it seems impossible. Perhaps that is what it would take, though. How anyone in senior management at McLaren can sleep at night is beyond me, and Bob Fernley's Monday morning dismissal is only the top of the iceberg. I think it's safe to say that in Woking, hell has frozen over, and Fernley was just the first recipient of the giant battering ram that needs to beat the living daylights of those in charge. Like a phoenix, can we hope that McLaren can rise from the ashes of shame and once again take to the sky and fly supreme? As the sun sets over Woking at the end of yet another painful day, let us hope that better times are ahead, and that this storied team, founded by the great man from down under, can get up and get over its flawed management and lead the way once again.
Philip, keep up the good work, and thank you for that. Very profound and deep thinking there, NASA. And now, as we spin the globe and go around the world with Motorsports Mondial, with the king, the guru himself, Nasser Hamid.
Thank you, sir, and we shall start the Motorsports Mondial with a few Monaco moments. Many drivers scored their maiden wins in Monte Carlo. They include Jack Brabham, Jean-Pierre Beltoise, Patrick Depailler, Riccardo Patrese, Olivier Panis, and our favorite Jarno Trulli. Graham Hill was the original Mr. Monaco with 5 wins, matched by Michael Schumacher. Ayrton Senna has the most wins, 6. Surprisingly, Jim Clark never won the Monaco Grand Prix. On some occasions, he was racing at Indy, so that must be kept in mind. Those who perished in the Principality include Luigi Fagioli in 1952, though not in a Formula One car. He was taking part in a GT car as a support race in practice when he crashed and died some days later. And of course, the very sad ending of Lorenzo Bandini in a fiery accident in his Ferrari in 1967. And I think Clark, although I have not looked at each and every Monaco Grand Prix, but I think the only success in Monte Carlo, only American success in Monte Carlo, came through Peter Revson's victory in the 1965 Formula 3 race. Okay, now we move to our departed favorite, Rapidos, now known as Formula 2. Feature race was run on Friday. Dutch driver Nick de Vries was the winner from pole position. Sprint race was won by your fellow Français Antoine Hubert by a few inches from Swiss driver Louis Delatraz, and his Papito used to be in F1. And Chinese driver Guan Yu Zhu was third, and we interviewed Guan Yu Zhu last year at Sanford. In the championship, Canadian Nicolas Latifi still leads, 95 points to 94 over Nick de Vries. Mick Schumacher is 14 with same number of points. So unless Mick Schumacher does a remarkable recovery in the second half like he did in F3 last year, I don't think Mick is going to win the F2 championship this year. And if you are not winning F2 in your first year, it will be very hard to be a driver with one of the top teams. But stranger things have happened in life, and his last name would be a huge, huge asset. Formula E from Berlin, Lucas Di Grassi won the race for Audi. And now we come to the Indy 500 Saint Alonso. What a story we had this year. First French pole sitter since 1919, and El Machismo no show. I think we need Kimberly Clark as a 2019 sponsor for F1 Weekly. Back to the race, there was talk of thunderstorms and 90% chance of rain on Sunday. The only rain we had was from Team Penske and their poleman, your fellow Français Simon Pagenaud. This race really comes alive after the first 100 laps, and then there is the intensity like no other race after 170 laps. And what a battle we had between Pagenaud, very proud to say, a friend of F1 Weekly, Alexander Rossi. He was really on it and lost the lead to Pagenaud in the closing stages. Now, Rossi some years ago won the race on his first attempt. Joseph Newgarden and Takuma Sato also got on the action. Another guy who would have been a very deserving and popular champion was local boy and Tony George's stepson, Ed Carpenter. He was strong all day and kept Pagenaud in close company most of the race. The battle between Pagenaud and Rossi continued till the checkered flag, with Pagenaud giving Roger Penske win number 18 at the Brickyard, and it all started for the captain in 1972 with Mark Donohue. Pagenaud becomes the first French winner of the Indy 500 in over 100 years. That is very impressive. So our lay congratulations to him. Quite a day for your people, Mr. Rogers. The other two French drivers to win the Indy 500 are Jules Gou in 1913 in a Peugeot and René Thomas in 1914 driving a Delage. Man, if they can get Alonso or Button as full-time drivers, IndyCar racing will be back to what it was before Tony George went UB Illin and started IRL. And now, a little goodie bag from the Brickyard. Winner of the first 500 in 1911, Ray Haroon, was the first person to use a rear-view mirror on a motor vehicle. Sterling Moss's Papito, Dr. Alfred Moss, also raced once upon a time in the Indy 500 long time ago. First full-time winner is Mr. A.J. Foyt from Houston, Texas. And of course, he now has a team which is basically run by his son. Formula One world champions who won Indy 500 are Jim Clark, Graham Hill, Mario Andretti, and Emerson Fittipaldi. F1 champions who raced at Indy but did not win the greatest spectacle in racing include Jack Brabham, Denny Hulme, Jochen Rindt, Arnage, and the hombre who got bumped this year, the no-show Machismo. Okay, sir. Any thoughts on the Indy 500, sir?
No, I thought it was great. I had a couple of hot dogs, and there you go.
Okay, I did not watch the TV because I was there, but I heard that NBC Sports, which was covering the 500, I believe, for the first time, that they showed a lot of TV commercials. Is that correct?
That is very correct. You got more commercials than racing.
Well, that is always the case. And you know what ABC used to do that really used to really upset me? I mean, we're in the closing stages, and then they will say, I remember one year they did this. Let's take a visit with Sandy Andretti, who is Marco's mom, and her new Italian kitchen and bathroom in the new Nazareth, Pennsylvania home. And then it would be like, let's take a look at Katie Guerrero and what she's doing in her garden. Oh man, I mean, absolute useless, non-racing stuff they would do in the last 50 races. And that was very bad. And I remember this going back many, many years ago. Some guy wrote, I think it was in Auto Week, letters to the editor, that the Indy 500, the actual racing action on TV, ABC, was like 45 minutes of racing. So I guess nothing has changed from ABC to NBC.
Nothing.
But then again, be thankful that it is available. Actually, the race was not blacked out. The race was blacked out in local Indianapolis area.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Now we come to a sort of a personal remembrance of Niki Lauda. May I proceed with your express written consent?
Vamos, amigos.
Okay, donkey. Niki Lauda. Man, what a great and sad shock it was to hear Niki Lauda had passed away. The super rad, the racer who came back from the dead to win 2 more F1 championships before giving up on going in circles to become an equally successful aviation professional. Much has been said about his epic battle with James Hunt and the near-fatal crash in 1976. So today we will look at how he got there and what he did after retiring from racing. Niki was born into money but was not too happy when he was told none of it was available for his racing adventure. An Austrian bank agreed to a loan to fund his F1 drive with BRM, but then the bank officer backtracked, thinking no one will be there to repay if the borrower was killed in a racing accident. Solution was quickly found, Niki paying for life insurance with bank as the beneficiary, and there he was hustling his BRM and arguing with team principal Louis T. Stanley. Always ready for his frank opinion, from calling his first Ferrari F1 car a piece of caca to blaming their lack of racing championship success on spaghetti culture, Niki was one of few great racing personalities like Gilles Villeneuve and Ronnie Peterson and Michele Alboreto, who was well liked and respected by all. To say he was a very determined individual will be a massive understatement. We all know about the comeback from his fiery crash. After returning to the cockpit after missing only 2 races, he was flaming mad to find out Ferrari had arranged a test session with only Carlos Reutemann doing the driving. He insisted on driving the car, and as he wrote in one of his books, went faster than Reutemann after only a few laps. He was equally ruthless in the air, fighting Austrian authorities to get his Lauda Air taking off. Many years ago, I was driving by LAX, and a Lauda Air Boeing 767 was landing, and I remember thinking, what a great guy, successful in the cockpit of a race car and a big jetliner, because in the early days he used to fly his 767 to, Thailand and other places where it was more like it was actually a charter airline, so they would go to all these places and he would be the pilot in command in the left seat. He was very complimentary in his own special way, saying about his McLaren teammate Alain Prost, "No matter how hard I tried, I could not go faster than the effing frog." That was typical Niki Lauda. On a personal note, I first met him at Brands Hatch when he was testing with McLaren before the 1982 Italian Grand Prix. And Clark, I had written a story on him for a major English newspaper in Karachi and asked an Austrian journalist, a very well-known gentleman by the name of Helmut Zwickel, if he could ask Niki to sign it for me. He introduced me to Niki, and I was expecting a quick autograph and move on, As is the case with these things, people at that level. I could not believe when he started reading it and checking the photographs and captions, and finally he looked at me and said, "This is very good, thank you very much," and signed it. I had brief chats with him several times since then. Last time was in Austin a few years ago. He was always very approachable and friendly. Now he has gone above the clouds. We extend our sympathies to his family, friends, and fans. Rest in peace to the champion. Your thoughts on Nicky, sir, if you have any?
When I checked my computer in the morning after waking up and making coffee, I was stunned. I was floored. I didn't expect it.
Yeah, even though he was pretty sick, but this really came as a shock. And I think it was very nice for Formula One people to pay tributes to him. Most of the team did. Most of the drivers, media people, they were all wearing red hats. That was a very nice tribute.
That was the best part of Monaco for me.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, sir, finally, Blast from the Past, featuring famous last words. This comes from an interview with Patrick Head in the June 1999 edition of F1 Racing magazine. Patrick is asked, "So why does Max Mosley not agree with you?" He replied, and I quote, "You know Max, and his view is that it's obvious to a 15-year-old student that what Max Mosley says is correct. Well, I have to say that there are a lot of people well above that level of education who don't agree with him." End of quote. Patrick really nailed this one on the head. Thank you for listening and enjoy the Grand Prix of Canada.
Thanks, Nas. I'm glad you did not bring up the dungeon in the basement.
Well, there's a time and place for everything. I will bring that up when we talk about Linda Hurst.
I understand, Nas.
Well, here is the deal, Clark. I was thinking about your favorite question, who's going to win? Well, this is where Lewis got his first pole. This is where he got his first win. And Bottas has always done well here. So we're going to have an epic battle between the two silver cars.
You really believe the term epic will be the correct... Okay, so exciting. I'm looking forward to an epic battle this year.
Well, there could be rain, there could be mistakes, look, Max did a love tap with Bottas, with both the silver cars. And amazing, all three people finished. One of these days, somebody will bite the bullet.
So in other words, to get an exciting Formula One Grand Prix, we need to look for a higher authority to intervene.
Well, look how Max Verstappen got his first win.
That's true, but that could have been a higher authority.
Yes, and how one season McLaren won anything and everything except for Monza 1988. These things happen, Mr. Rogers.
I understand, and I'm waiting on pins and needles.
You know what's going to happen when something like this happens and George Russell wins the race for Williams? We're going to hear one word coming from Oviedo. And what is that magical word?
A lucky man.
No, karma.
Karma. Okay, I was thinking Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Thank you, Nas. Keep up the good work. I want to thank everybody who listens. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.